Howdy y'all, thanks for joining us. You just received your Texas Weapon Systems dogleg rail top cover mount for your AK type rifle. In this video, we're going to demonstrate a step-by-step installation. We're going to show you the 3 key adjustments to get the optimal fit and performance on your specific rifle. And at the end of this, we're going to give you a couple of bonus tips for best use of your new kit. So, stick around. So, let's begin by examining the contents of our new kit. Firstly, we've got our cover body with a pre-installed hinge fork and takedown pin. You've got your 4mm hinge pin with E-clip. Got a hinge base. Nut plate, socket head cap screw, and Allen wrench. Cover release button. And your instructions. Folks, please always read your instructions first. On this particular installation, we're also going to show you our optional basic rear peep sight. Now this tiny little guy, that's transformative on your rifle. Next, let's see what tools we need to get this installation done quickly and efficiently. First, your iPro. Never forget your iPro. You're going to need a small hammer, a stubby, flat-bladed screwdriver, needle nose pliers, a 9/64 hex key wrench, medium-sized vice grip, a small square of sandpaper. Typically 100 to 120 grit works fine. And keep a few shop rags around so we don't scratch up our new installation. So let's get started. Okay folks, so I've laid out all of the parts that come in this kit on this blue shop towel here so we can get a clear image of everything that comes inside the box. Now, if we come over here and focus on the rifle itself, first thing we're going to have to do is remove that leaf sight. Anybody who's ever worked on these AKs knows that removing the leaf sight from these rifles can be a real bear. Now, if we understand what's happening inside of here, it makes that process a whole lot easier. To understand that better, we've prepared this cutaway version so we can see what's going on inside the rifle itself. Let me bring this over here. All right, now, to understand this here, first thing we have to look at is we have to see that the leaf sight has this little axle built into it. Now that's not a separate axle, you don't press that out separately. It is actually integral with the leaf sight itself. Now, in the rear sight block itself, there's a small hole right here shaped something like a keyhole. It's small at the top, 3mm, and it's a little bigger at the bottom, 4mm. The way this leaf sight resides in there is that it falls into that hole and gets pushed upwards. Now to guide it in, we've got this little groove right here, right there. Now get in closer because you need to see this. So the leaf spring, it's going to live right in there about like that. And the leaf sight lives right above it. So as the spring pushes up on the leaf sight, it locks it into the smaller portion of that keyhole shape. So to remove the leaf sight, we're going to need to compress the spring downwards, get the axle portion of the leaf sight lined up with that angled groove so that it can then slide right out. So let's take a look at how we actually do that on the rifle itself. All right, so now that we understand what's happening inside of our rear sight block, we'll get our actual installation done. We'll set these aside for right now. And we'll bring this guy over here. Now we're going to do a conventional field strip on this weapon. Let's get our all-important iPro put on. All right. Now we're going to reuse about half of the components on this recoil spring assembly, so we're going to keep this handy. If you recall from our demonstration there a moment ago, we've got this keyhole shape right there, and it's got the angled or ramped groove underneath it. We're going to want to compress the leaf spring underneath right over this axle assembly that's built into the leaf sight. Step number one is to adjust all the way up to the 1,000-meter setting. That gives us the proper angle. Our stub screwdriver is going to go into the groove machined into the top of this leaf sight right over this little axle center line there. And we're going to give it a sharp strike to compress the spring, and that drives the leaf sight out of there. But it comes out with such force that we don't want that thing to fly out and end up in the next county. So cover it with a rag, that way you can control it more easily. And it's just that easy. We're not going to reuse this guy. Next, we'll get our leaf spring pulled out of there. We're not going to reuse that guy either. Now, to install this hinge base on there, first thing we're going to do is check the fit of our hinge pin, make sure it goes through properly. Next, check the fit of the hinge pin to the rear sight block. There is a small flat feature cut into the head of this hinge pin. We want that to align down here with this cutout right there on the side of your rear sight block. We'll set that there for now. We're going to take the socket head's cap screw. We're going to screw it into the top of the nut plate. Now, the nut plate has a thin section back here at the wide part. It's got a thin section right there. See, it's kind of narrow on the top where the bolt is sticking up, and it's got a broad flat section machined into the bottom of it. That way you know how to orient it into the rear sight block. Now, I can hold it onto it right there, kind of maneuver it into that little groove where the leaf spring came out of. And now let me pull the bolt out of it, now that I've got the nut plate in place. Okay, we're going to take that hinge base and that hinge pin, and we're going to install them from right to left. It's important that we install these from right to left because the pin is kind of long. If you install it in the opposite direction, it will interfere with the proper functioning of the small lever that retains your gas tube in place. So, got that installed from right to left. We'll take that socket head cap screw, thread it down into the nut plate. Normally, you would install a drop of blue Loctite or some other equivalent thread locking adhesive, because with the vibration, the impact of firing these weapons, the vibration can cause that screw to come loose. Next, we take our E-clip. We're going to carefully install that in the groove on our hinge pin. There we are. So that completes the installation of our hinge base. Next, we're going to install the recoil spring assembly. The most important component of your recoil spring assembly is your cover release button. In this case, it's important to use the button that came as part of your kit. It has revised geometry to properly function with the new design of the cover. So, because we encounter quite a bit of variability in the design of these AK rifles, more the manufacture of these AK rifles, it is a 70-plus-year-old design that we're asking it to go well above and beyond its original design intent. So there's a couple of small flanges on either side of this cover release button that fit into a T-slot in the rear trunnion. Now we generally leave these flanges on the bit heavier side of the necessary tolerances because we want it to be a precise fit into your rear trunnion. What that means to you is that on some rifles, maybe 5 or 10 rifles out of 100, they'll need to have the bottom surface of this button sanded slightly to thin it down so that you get a smooth, proper fit into the rear trunnion of your rifle. Now, when you look at the underside of the release button, you'll notice that it's got a cutout on the right side flange. That's to allow it to function with the Yugoslavian pattern rifles, which have a grenade launcher feature. Now, the grenade, the Hugo rifle release buttons will fit in all standard rifles, but the other standard release buttons will not fit into the Hugo. So we standardized on the Hugo pattern, having a universal fit. In this particular case, it fits pretty good onto this rifle, but if you did need to sand it, what you would do is take your small piece of sandpaper, put it on a hard flat surface, and you would simply stroke back and forth several times to smooth out and sand it and thin out the bottom surface of the release button. If you don't have a surface like this vise here, you might just use a common hard tabletop surface, stroke it back and forth several times, trial fit it into the rifle, sand a little more, trial fit into the rifle until you get an optimal fit in your specific rifle. And so once you would do that, you would put a drop of oil in there to ensure you get a smooth function. Let me pull this aside for just a moment, and we're going to see how to take this guy apart. Again, very careful here. This can get away from us and take off flying like a rocket. So on a hard, firm surface like this bench top here, I'm going to gently compress the spring just a little bit, only maybe an inch or so, and carefully open up, spread apart these two wire loops here, and now I can pull off the spring retainer loop. Carefully disassemble those pieces. The original button that comes with this cover, we're going to set that aside. We're not going to reuse that piece. Now, we take the wire loop that came in there, and we're going to fish it back through here. Get a little jiggle there. Now, as we do this, keep your face away from the spring. Bring the secondary wire loop out and through, and you're going to put it across like a T. That'll hold it all together for you without risk of flying apart. Now, we take our spring retainer cap, we put it back onto the end of that little loop, pinch it with our fingers to hold it in place, and very carefully start pushing that secondary loop while controlling the spring. Boom. And there you have it. Now we're going to get it back over here. We'll put our bolt carrier back into the rifle. Install the recoil spring assembly. Next, we'll put our cover back onto the rifle. Actually, I got just slightly ahead of myself. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out again. I know it fits. I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to pull out the bolt carrier assembly, set that guy aside also. I told you I was going to show you the 3 adjustments on this cover. Okay. First adjustment is the hinge fork. Slides back and forth a tiny little bit. Okay. And the reason we have that is because, well, believe it or not, some receivers on these rifles do tend to be a little longer than the others. So I'm going to set it into the cross groove on the rear trunnion, and I'm going to pull the cover back all the way into the back of that slot. And once I've got it into the back of that slot while holding it down, I want to tighten these little screws. Again, in your final installation, you will take these out one by one and install a drop of blue Loctite on there to get them to stay permanently. Remember, recoil, vibration, these things want to come loose if you don't put Loctite on them. All right, so now we've got that first adjustment, front to back, taken care of by these 2 screws. The next adjustment we're going to do is on the right side of the cover, you'll notice it's got a little slit cut into it at a 45-degree angle. This innermost corner on that panel is slightly bent in just a tiny little bit. What that does for us is as that corner, which is bent in a little bit, contacts the right side of the receiver, it will cause this side panel here to flex outwards. We've essentially used this right side panel of the cover as a leaf spring. So on this particular rifle, I can feel that the cover, you hear that little snap? It's kind of gentle. I would like it to have just a little bit more snap to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my vice grip, Adjust it to carefully fit onto that little corner. I'm going to give it the tiniest little bend inwards. Now, you're not required to do this. It kind of depends on the fit of your particular rifle and if you want it a little tighter or not. Put that back in. Now let's... Can you hear a slight difference? We can definitely feel that it snaps in a little tighter. So that's our adjustment number 2. Adjustment number 3 is the actual fit between this hinge fork and this hinge base. I'll lean this rifle into you just a little bit right here. You'll see we've got that little split right there and a little hole drilled up there. The purpose of that is to allow us to either separate or close these two sides of that hinge base. So why would we want to do that? Well, some guys will keep multiple covers handy. They'll have one with a red dot, maybe another with a 1:6 low power variable optic. They just keep a collection of different optics that they run on their weapons. And if they want to get those on and off quick and easy, they might prefer a looser fit on there. If you want a tighter fit, because you're going to have, let's say, your 1:6 low power variable, and you're not going to run anything else, keep it a little tighter. So the way we adjust that is we take our flat blade screwdriver, the stubby one, we put it in there, and give it a few taps. Wiggle that a little bit. And now we trial fit. Small difference, small change. We'll try it a little more. Now be careful because it's easy to go too far. That's a little better. Now if I went too far and I needed to close it, I would just take my vice grip, open that guy up, put it on there, and just give it a gentle little squeeze. Open it up, adjust the screw a little bit, another gentle little squeeze. Do that 2, 3, 4 times until you get it just right. But here, I got that hinge pretty nice. Okay, so those are the 3 adjustments. We've got the hinge fork adjustment, front to rear. We've got the side panel adjustment, and we've got the hinge base adjustment. So those are the 3 adjustments that allow you to get an optimal fit on your particular rifle. Now, we're going to put this guy back in there. Put that recoil spring assembly back in there. Now you always want to charge your rifle a couple of times. That causes the release button to properly seat into the little square hole in the back of the cover body. Now this guy is good and tight. There's 0 movement anywhere on this mount, and this guy's ready to go. Now, next thing, we're going to install our basic rear peep sight. So the installation of our basic rear peep sight couldn't be any easier. Simply slide it on from the back, install the socket head cap screw, and tighten her down. It's just that easy. And now that rifle will be ready for service. I did promise you a couple of helpful tips at the end of this video, so that's what we're going to look at now. Now, because these products are actually deceptively simple, you look at them, not much for moving parts there, so you don't always realize the features or benefits you have available to you. If you take your rear peep sight and you move it away from the eye a little bit, a few slots, as you sight through this rifle, that aperture appears to decrease in size. That tightens up your aim when you're shooting in bright daylight conditions. So you may want to adjust that to where it's comfortable for you. So the distance from the butt plate to the aperture, critical for good shooting. Okay. for right now, we're just going to go ahead and leave it on the first slot. The next tip I've got for you is I will often see people struggling to manipulate the weapon. So I'll see that they want to get their rifle cover open, and so while holding it from the grip, don't want to come here and open it this way. Now you can do that, but the fact is your thumb is a lot stronger than your index finger. So as you do this, especially if you're tired, your hands are sweaty, slippery, that can be problematic. It works a lot easier if you come over the top and you hold the rifle this way, leaving the buttstock to support underneath your forearm. Now you can simply press on it with your thumb, a lot stronger, and it opens a lot easier for you. Clear your jam, do whatever you need to do to service your weapon, charge it, and you're back in service. Okay. So that concludes our installation video. I hope you found this helpful. Again, thank you for being a TWS customer. We look forward to working with you in the future.